myself, I started with the Department of Buildings in 1987 and worked up until 2002. So I worked as a plan examiner, deputy borough commissioner, and borough commissioner in all the boroughs except Staten Island. And so I feel like I have quite an exposure as to what the agency was about. I left in 2002 to work for Homeless Services, which one would not predict might be of use to me today, but I assure you it is. And I could go on and on about that, but it was a great experience. From there to the City University system, which also was a fantastic experience, particularly as we move into sustainability efforts and energy management across the city today. I think I got some great exposure. I have some interesting visions that we're still trying to formulate as my team gets put together. I'm only into my second month. So as you might guess, 8 months without a commissioner, we had some movement around the agency, and so we're still putting together our team, and once we do, we'd like to move ahead with a number of things, starting with our hub service system, which is, I like to think of as our 6th borough. We have 5 different boroughs, but we have one location at 80 Center Street where where my predecessor started, and I'd like to expand on electronic filing. I think there isn't any design firm out there today, or very few, that does their drawings by hand anymore, and it's all computer aided and it's digital, and so we would like to expand on our efforts to have drawings submitted to us in an electronic form. This isn't anything new. I think it's happening all over the world. It's just that no one's doing it in the volume that we're doing it, and I think that we have a great challenge in front of us to extend it to the next level, where we will accept drawings, we'll comment on drawings, we'll have virtual meetings using whatever software there is. There are multiple platforms to do virtual meetings, and our examiners will meet with you and give you their comments, and then we have the ability then to comment on your drawings using any number of the various codes that we have to enforce: the zoning resolution, the building code, the multiple dwelling law, the energy conservation code, and numerous others, as we can then provide those comments. That's one thing, and that's quite a chunk in and of itself. Another thing is we have a very ambitious program to bring tablets to our inspection divisions, both on the development side and the enforcement side, so that our inspectors can be used more efficiently. The point is efficiency. Everybody has a DOB horror story. I'm very much aware of that. And our goal is to try to address that to the best of our ability. It's about customer service. First, it's about safety first, and then after that, it's about customer service, and it's getting our inspectors where they need to be. So we're in the process of working with a company that's going to allow us to assign our inspectors from the field and get them to the places they need to be where they are. They're going to be GPS located at all times, and they'll have all the forms they need on their computer when they need it as they go to an inspection, whether it's a site safety inspection to look at what's going on down at this site right here, or whether they need to take a look at a sign-off for a townhome that's being renovated so that it can be occupied next week. So it's a very broad scope of what we're asking to be done, and I think it's a great system. It also will allow for design professionals, construction managers, filing representatives, building owners to communicate with us via an app to say, hey, I'd like to have an inspection. Can you tell me when I can get one? And our system is expected to, and I'm sure we'll have a few glitches at first, but we're going through some testing now to give you that real-time information. The other very important thing about that is when our inspector makes a comment or has any kind of feedback about having made his visit or her visit, their comments will then be fed out to all the stakeholders. One of our biggest challenges, and one of the more frustrating things that I run into as a manager of the agency, and also my other managers that work for me, is only partial information gets distributed to the people who are the stakeholders, particularly if you're a small business owner, you're a restaurateur, you're investing an enormous amount of money to get your restaurant up. You need the cash flow. We're very much aware of that. We're very sensitive to the small business challenges, and that is you need to get up and running. So you need to have your fire suppression system signed off. You need to have your plumbing system signed off. The place looks great. Why can't I open? So you need a few things that need to be signed off, and you're only getting part of the information. What this system will allow us, or what we think it will allow, is for every person who has a stake in that, especially the restaurateur in this case, to hear what's happening. In a perfect case, an example last week was when we had a restaurateur who was desperate, and was only getting partial information from their plumber. And I'm going to say that it was just miscommunication, but one could speculate as to many other things. But that person wasn't getting all the information. And after we had 4 or 5 people spending time to find out about it, we found out that there was several things that were not being communicated to that person, that once we were able to get all of the information in place, then we would be able to sign it off, so then that business could open. And I think I could repeat that story in different forms about 100 times over. So that's another innovation. I'd like to say one more before we move on to the next question, and that is we have an innovation review board. I think everybody heard in the last week or so that the mayor has launched a very bold program in the 80 by 50 program to reduce our carbon footprint around the city, and the Department of Buildings is going to have a major stake in accomplishing that goal. We expect a heavy lift in the next few years by adding resources to do more full examinations of our plans for energy management and energy compliance. We also expect to add inspectors to go out to the site to view what's happening. So we're excited about that. But one of the things that goes along with that is an innovation review board, in that we are wanting to be part of the solution, not just be reactive. So if you have a product that you think is going to help achieve a goal, but might not yet be addressed in the code, then we would like you to bring it to us, and we're going to try to consider it as much as possible. It's not just a few of us in the department, but we do have committees of experts who help us. And the perfect example that we raised last week in a discussion with the Urban Green Council is a phase change material that we approved that was completely silent in the code, but it's a product that you can put in to supplement your insulation, and it will help absorb and distribute thermal energy during the phase change of, well, in this case, it was a chemically infused wax. But it's fairly low-tech, but high-tech and innovative in terms of construction. So that's one other tool that we have in terms of technology and what we're doing to try to be out there and learning new things and trying to take an active role rather than a passive role.
So, you seem to be talking a lot about trying to smooth the regulatory process, of course. And if we're going to look at the Build It Back program, which obviously, I don't know, the New York Times recently described as underdesigned and overmanaged, or no, actually overdesigned and undermanaged, sorry. And could you just talk a little bit about what DOB's role within that program is, because obviously there are a lot of different entities there, and then what you guys will be doing to try to make that smoother going forward?
I'm happy to. My predecessor and our team was on the coast of Staten Island and Brooklyn and the Rockaways soon after the storm, and I think we played a major role in helping to get past the first few weeks. But you're right, it's been a tough going since then. So our role has been to establish a set of examiners and inspectors who are there at the ready. We have a place at 80 Center Street that happens to be housed in the same area as our hub that I referred to earlier. They're dedicated with dedicated funding from a grant that came to the city to receive plans from DEP, but mostly HPD and the Housing Recovery Office to move forward in getting people's houses approved for permit and to get built back as quickly as possible. Now, nothing is ever as easy as one might expect it to be, but we're trying the best we can to eliminate any of the bureaucracy. Some of the issues that we're running into are, buildings that are in the bed of a mapped street or having to adjust to the new floodplain levels, which we have experts now in consulting with that. So we work very closely with Amy Peterson and her folks at the Build It Back program. So we're excited to help that move forward. There's a certain amount of jobs that have gone through now that we're pleased with, but we fully expect a wave to be coming soon, and we're staffing up to get that done.
I mean, can you talk a little bit about why it was so inert under Bloomberg?
No, I can't.
So it recently came to light that these plans for like 9 out of 10 buildings with the energy code, those had failed their energy audits, and I was wondering what the department was doing about that going forward.
It's a great question. In 2013 is when we were mandated to begin our full examination of plan exams based on the International Energy Conservation Code, which is part of our model code system. We have staffed up to a degree. We need to be staffing up more so that we can be more thorough. But it's something that a point that I made last week, and I'm going to make it again, is that 100 years ago, the plan examination process at the Department of Buildings was, how are you getting your concrete formwork properly placed with the appropriate amount of reinforcement bar, and are you getting your rivets in place, or maybe even that really advanced technology, welding, if you could do that. So it was that kind of a review, and that now is a proven technology, and the design professionals are experts at that, and we acknowledge that, and we learn from them, and we also have some of our own experts, and we allow for the design professionals to seal their plans and say, hey, this is going to comply with that. We're in a different era now that I think it's easily comparable. Today is somewhat like 100 years ago. We're into energy management and sustainability, where it's kind of a new age. So we are doing examinations for glazing, the R value, the U value, the what are you doing between the space between your slab and the facade space? What's your infiltration of your air? What's your Energy Star rating? So this is somewhat new to our examiners, and it's quite new to a lot of the design professionals that are out there. So our system has become somewhat of a de facto educational system for a lot of the design community. So what we're finding is that we have to raise objections, and we have to then go over those issues with the design community. And what we're finding then slowly is that the next set of plans that are coming in over time are higher quality and higher quality. And so we're not surprised, we're disappointed, but not that surprised that we're not getting that kind of compliance. Believe me, the advocates are letting us know, and that's good because that's how we get better. So we're staffing up slowly under our Chief Sustainability Officer, Gina Broca, and she meets with me regularly about how we're doing what we're doing, and talking about that 9 out of 10 failure rate. So after sending inspectors to the various sites, we've been issuing letters of deficiency to tell people, hey, you are not meeting the standard. You need to make a correction here. So that's just basically a written notice. In the coming months, into 2015, we will start to write notices of violation, ECB violations, for which there will be fines, and you'll have to demonstrate that you've complied. So we think we're on the right track. The point is to go after this plan and make it as user-friendly at first and voluntary, and we think it's absolutely an achievable plan. We just have to help the community get there, and we want to do it together. It's definitely not the New York City government, and it's definitely not an individual. It really is individuals, the private sector, and government together, and that's how we want to start this as we move forward to implement the Built to Last program.
And you were talking about being more sort of proactive as opposed to reactive. Can you talk a little bit more about that? That just interests me. As far as communicating these things to a broader audience, the people that need to hear these things.
One of the things that I noticed after returning to the department, which I'm very impressed by, is that we have a full-time presence at the Office of Emergency Management. And I don't know if any of you have had the pleasure to see the Office of Emergency Management in Brooklyn. It is quite a command center in terms of just taking control of any type of emergency. It's a full-time center that is completely modernized in every way. We have a full-time presence there every day, all day, year-round, where we collaborate with the Office of Emergency Management, the fire department, and in some cases the police department, so that we're proactive in that we are on the site along with the first responders, standing by, standing back, waiting for the first responders to tell us what they want us to do in terms of responding to any kind of a construction emergency. So I guess that is somewhat reactive rather than proactive, but the fact that we are there very, very quickly is an enormous improvement than what it used to be. Another thing that's happened in the last few years, I think, which is common in the industry in general, is we are awash in data, and so we have added data analytics capability, which is extremely useful for us to identify trends in what we see going on with applications, accidents, types of filings, the types of buildings that are being done, who's complying. We know the applicants who are problem applicants. We know the filing representatives who are filing who are problems. We have a very robust internal audits division and a buildings marshal who will take a strong enforcement action against those people who are not doing the right thing. We think that serves the community in many ways by trying to demonstrate that we are proactively going after the people who are doing the wrong thing, and clearly there are. So I want that message to get out as much as anything, and that is that we are proactively seeking to maintain the safety in the city, but also to monitor those people that might not be doing the right thing, and we have the tools to let those people know and to take action and to refer them to the district attorney's office or the U.S. Attorney's Office or the Department of Investigation and demonstrate that we have the highest standards of integrity and professionalism, and we want people to know that. So that's one of the proactive measures that we take.
And you guys aren't primarily, designing the mayor's affordable housing plan, of course, but would you want to talk a little bit about your role in there, what you guys will be looking out for as those plans get unrolled?
Thank you. Yes, I would love to. And you're right. I don't have a specific input at this time, although I have to give the mayor credit. I mean, when he gave me the pleasure of taking this role, he said, Rick, bring your ideas. You're not just, I know you've got a lot on your plate as a building commissioner, but if you have ideas, bring them. And he said that's the way everybody should be. It shouldn't be just left to the commissioner of HPD or Deputy Mayor Alicia Glenn. So obviously those are the two leaders in the affordable housing mix, but I'm working with them to address their needs, their concerns about affordable housing. And oftentimes that does that is influenced by our regulatory process, and the goal always with us is to be as customer friendly as possible, to be as communicative and professional as possible with the design professionals. I mean, my staff and me, since I've been around the block a few times, I think I have a relationship with a large amount of the design community, and they're welcome to call me or my first deputy, Tom Ferriello, and we can get them to the right people to say, hey, I'm having a problem. Let's see how we can correct it. I just directed somebody yesterday, and I think Tom this morning is having a video meeting with one of our regular filers just to go over a fairly complex issue, which I'm hoping he can get resolved. So our job is to identify the issues that there might be some questions about. If any of you attempted to write legislation, particularly if it's related to code, you simply can't write it for every scenario, and I know I've tried and been very, very frustrated. And so what that means as a design professional is you're trying to design something and you're looking at the code, and it simply doesn't quite match up. So then you say, okay, what now? What now? So what you need is a code professional to kind of say, yes, that would work. That's equivalent. There's safety there. Move on so that we don't hold you up any further. And that's part of my role. Our role with the affordable housing is to just not let that happen. So let's keep pushing forward, which is similar to the Build It Back, by the way. I mean, that's the point, is to review it, move it forward, get to a point where we can have this equivalencies that we want in terms of safety and ease of construction, and get it to yes so that we can start building. That's the point.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how the landscape is different in the city than it was when you were, in Queens and the Bronx? It was.
Manhattan, Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. I can say it's become a little bit more homogeneous from a construction point of view. I would never want to tell New Yorkers that it's homogeneous because it's such a great place for neighborhoods, and I think I had a unique position to be able to serve in all those neighborhoods, and I absolutely loved it. But the landscape from a construction perspective has become a little more blended so that it's not quite so different. There aren't so many idiosyncrasies. I think any of you here who've been in construction would say, and can still say to a certain degree, that why can I do this thing in Brooklyn but I can't do it in Queens? I'm hoping that that's farther and fewer between, and hopefully in the next few years that won't be happening at all. And with the adoption of the model code, the international building codes, that it also is expected to make more uniformity in terms of how construction is applied. So, and also the technology and just the sophistication of contractors and design professionals. They've been around and all over the boroughs, and I think the level of young people and young professionals who are coming up have high expectations and have high standards themselves, and I think that translates into a high level of professionalism and a high demand on our department to produce. So we feel that while there are other cities in the world that might have a little bit of an edge in terms of being able to say they have fancier gadgets and can move stuff around digitally maybe a little bit better than we can. You know what, we're the biggest city in the country, and we have numbers that are that don't compare at all to any place anywhere else in our country in terms of the volume that we move, in terms of making people viable in terms of their construction projects and getting their jobs signed off and enabling them to start their business and start their cash flow. So it's all about making sure that after the safety has been met, that people can get their projects done and get their business running. We don't want to be a factor in someone's success in their business, other than the fact that they need to be in business and getting their cash flow going. So I don't think anyone compares to us in our ability to do that, and I think that that's one thing that's gotten better since the last time I was here, and I couldn't be more proud to be part of it. I truly could not be.
And so, talking about the collapse in East Harlem that happened last March, obviously that was primarily a Con Edison issue, but you guys are involved in inspecting what happened there and et cetera. And of course, people are going to be worried about something similar happening in the future, and I'm just wondering what DOB's role in there might be, especially from a proactive standpoint.
Well, that's a difficult question to answer. One thing I would say is that there are over 1 million buildings in the 5 boroughs, and it's hard to stay on top of every one of those buildings. That's why we have a very sophisticated 311 system, and it's one of those things where if you see something, or possibly in this case smell something, you need to let all of the people know, and it's a multi-agency response. Obviously, we do license master plumbers who are in charge of gas piping around the city, and they do an outstanding job. And I can tell you that of the tens of thousands of piping applications that we process every year, I think there's an outstanding record of what the plumbers do and what our plumbing inspectors do. But again, it's a multi-agency effort, and it's a multi-agency response, and that's about all I can say about that for now.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you'd like to add? And then we might have a few minutes for questions.
I think that I really can't talk a lot about this. I try to tell my staff that I'm the chief cheerleader for the agency, because I'm very proud of them. I know the professionals that we have that work at the department, and the breadth of the work that we do, I think, is known to very few people. And if you give me an hour, I could touch on a few of those things, but I won't bore you with that now. So I'm very happy to take some questions. Construction permit approvals and the impact on the economy. Believe me, it's not lost on me or my executive staff that if a permit's not issued, there's people in the background waiting. You don't get to a point of filing an application with us, in most cases, until there's been an awful lot of activity behind that. So there was a finance person involved. First, there was an entrepreneur, someone who conceived the plan, then somebody related to the finance, and very likely some legal advice. Then hopefully a design professional got involved. And then in our city, if it's a project of any decent size, you're likely to have a filing representative or an architectural consultant, or otherwise known as an expediter, involved to just kind of help. So that's a team right there, and those are expenses, and there's no joke in terms of the expenses involved. So I take that very seriously, so does my executive staff. So we know that by the time it arrives on our desk, there's been a lot behind it. And so the discussions that we have with our examiners, because sometimes it gets a little bit lost, is that, guys, you got to remember that there's a lot behind this, and make a decision, whether follow your heart and what you think, what you've been trying to do. And then if it's not going to make the person happy, then that's fine. You need to do what's right, and then let them appeal it if they need to. Well, all that is to say that we have great respect for the fact that there's a lot more to the piece of paper and the plans that go behind it when we get it, because it absolutely affects the economy of the city. It absolutely affects the small businesses, which is very important to this mayor. And the homeowner stuff. Because believe me, I'm not talking about just Manhattan. I know very well the other boroughs, and if I'm a homeowner and I want to add an extension to my home, that's a big deal. The same amount of people got involved with that as they did with a 25-story enlargement to a 25-story building, which happens. But it's the same amount of angst for that homeowner and investment of time, etc. So it's real, and we respect it, and we have to revisit it on a regular basis, because sometimes that message gets lost. I'll be honest. I think everybody realizes that sometimes that message gets lost. It's my job to communicate it on a regular basis.
Yes, hi, Rebecca Louie with the Consortium for Worker Education. Thank you. You mentioned staffing up, that you were staffing up. You also just sort of did the 5 fingers of different jobs involved. So I'm curious, where's staffing up? Who's being hired? And of your staff, with all these changes, both in building code and technology to sort of make it an app and get everything online, what kind of changes are you training staff to keep them up to current and changing levels? So new staff and keeping people current.
Well, I think I alluded to one of the more obvious ones, and that was with sustainability and energy management. Clearly, 80 by 50 is something that we're excited about. We're just starting to raise our excitement level, and with that comes a request for new needs to our office and management and budget, which means, hey, we need some more lines here if we're going to do what we think we're going to do, because we think that we are going to be one of the major lifters to accomplish this task. And so far, we've gotten really good feedback. So staffing up is staffing up of inspectors and examiners for the energy side under our chief sustainability officer, who reports to my first deputy commissioner for technical affairs. Because again, as I mentioned earlier, it's a technical review to learn about what it takes for sustainability. The other thing is, in an upcycle of construction, which we're in right now, I don't think it's any surprise for anyone in this room to hear me say that a lot of my good people get picked off by the construction firms. Guess what? The construction firms pay better than we do. I know you're surprised to hear that, but so it's not uncommon. So we're in that cycle. So staffing up is trying to backfill some of the losses that we incurred over the last, well, I'm going to say 8 months while there wasn't a commissioner, because that's an easy thing for me to say. Yes, they are. Yeah. Yes, and some of them make overtime. If anybody read the newspaper today. So.
One more quick question. So I can go on that staffing up. We do have the need, and it's a constant challenge.
Good morning. You mentioned the international building codes earlier. Just recently, the City Council passed a bill to delay the construction codes implementation from October 1st to December 31st. So, two-part question. Number one, is that going to be enough time? And number two, what would it take for New York City to actually line up with the international codes on the years that they're supposed to be implemented?
Number one, on the delay, I think
It will be enough. In fact, I debated this with my staff about asking and working with City Council to defer the start date to December 31. I had two sets of groups that were giving me advice, and that was, Rick, the industry's had plenty of time. Why do you need to give them 3 more months? And the other side was, you know, it's a 2,000-page bill, and it looks great in terms of legislation in a legislative format while it's sitting on the website. But you know what, if it's not integrated with the actual document, that if you're a design professional or a consultant and you don't have the two documents integrated, it's kind of a tough tool to work with. So you would have the legislation here and the international code here, and the legislation has to modify. So it makes it a difficult tool. I was asked to try to see if we could give a few more months, because we didn't get it online, we didn't get the integrated document online until just a couple of weeks ago. So to have it take effect on October 1 would have been a challenge. I thought that the pluses outweighed the minuses on that, so that's why we went ahead and supported that bill. And I think everyone will be fairly pleased come December 31. I know there were a few people that were not. The second question was again? Oh, aligning with the international codes. So we have a partnership with the International Code Council, who is the organization that produces the model codes, and we meet with them fairly regularly, and they also help us to organize our groups. Now they're neutral in how we modify our codes, but they help provide the baseline for us to make the tweaks that we need to for the uniqueness of the dense urban environment that New York City is. And so for us to be able to do that, we usually lag a year behind. So the 2014 code is going, or a year or two behind. So what will be the New York City 2014 code will be the modified version of the International Code Council's 2012 code. And as we move forward, I anticipate that we would do a 2017 or 2018 code that would be the modified version of the ICC 2015 code. That's not uncommon as you go around the world in terms of code modifications. And in fact, the International Code Council kind of expects that, and they're a great partner in what we do. I think it was a great step from my predecessors to move away from the, I don't know if any of you knew this, but New York City was quite unique in the United States in that it had its own building code. And it was a source of frustration to a lot of design professionals to say, you know, why, if I come to New York, that I have to treat you guys so special? I mean, I know it's a dense place, but, you know, can you just kind of line up with the rest of the world? And that's kind of what we're doing with the International Code Council, and we're very proud of that.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Commissioner.
Thank you.